Hey, it is 5 o'clock. Please rise and join me for the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll begin with the open forum. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and address the board at this time? Okay. Moving on to celebrating our community successes. First, we have Patty Graybrook and Mary Jo Dorman for the Albert Lee Public Library.
The head of the Children's Library, the public library. And I don't know, she goes back as long as I remember being a great collaborator with the school district, as coming in and informing our classrooms of summer programs, public library events. And the last 4 or 5 years ago, we started, and as I'm talking, Ashley's just scrolling some pictures. You can scroll, Ashley, so they can see. We started a summer kickoff event where in May we do it by elementary buildings. So one night might be Sibley and whatever building, Halverson's building, and families and students from those buildings can come and get free books, pizza, learn more about the library. Patty puts on some interactive reading activities. The firemen come, read books to kids. We have the interpreters there, so we can be handing out, assisting with filling out public library cards. And we keep track of the library cards we fill out over the years. Some years was 28, lots of cards. And so just really promoting the public library, because these are all of our kids, public library, the school district, our community, that reading is important. It's a right, it's not a privilege, and giving access to all for books to make sure all students are literate. And so tonight we thought, let's take out an opportunity to thank Patty for everything she has done. Oh, by the way, these events have been very well attended. The first year we held it, we had, I think, 800 or 900 people. The second year, over 1,000. So they are big events. And as you can see, there's a lot of teachers in the pictures. So Patty has her public library staff, all staff on board. We have many staff members from the schools that are coming, and it's a great way to promote literacy. So I'd just like to thank you with the plaque, and also, whenever I get free books to promote community literacy, they come your way.
And a little puppet too, that's awesome, I
the
love it.
Llama books.
Well, I appreciate this. I don't know that I deserve it. I feel like I'm doing my job. This is a job I love. This is a job my whole heart is in. But I do appreciate the collaboration we have with the school district. I am the state representative for our summer reading program, and so every year I go someplace and meet with all other state reps. And every time I go, they always ask me, how do you get into the school? How does the school allow you to come and talk? And we've never had a problem getting into the schools. I mean, I've been at the library it'll be 18 years, and we've been doing it every year. And not only do we do the summer school visits, every elementary in Albert Lee visits the library in first grade, learns how to get a library card, learns the other things we have at the library. Second grade at Sibley now does a Know Your Government tour, and they come to the library and they get a tour of the government, how the city council works, the mayor, they meet the mayor. And I think, like Mary Jo said, we have the same goal, that all children love to read, and that it's a lifelong, you can do it for your life. and it takes you everywhere. And so I appreciate what we have, and I hope it goes on for a long, long time.
We do too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
So
much.
here's a plaque. One of you have it.
You're so sweet. Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, you know me.
Thank you, Patty. Any comments? Just,
Patty, wait, you're not done.
Patty, I agree.
Being an adult, I don't do
Yeah.
adult stuff.
I agree with everything that you said. It's a great collaboration. There's only one thing I disagreed with. You said that you weren't maybe deserving of it, and you are. I remember when my son and I went for story time, and you are amazing. Anytime anyone would sub for you, they just couldn't do it quite like Patty did. So thank you for everything you do.
As any school teacher knows how hard it is to fill in for anybody, whether you're good or not. I mean, it's hard. You're a different person, but I really, truly appreciate it. It's a love, certainly. Thank you.
All right, thank you again so much.
next, we have the American Legion Auxiliary. Mary Jo?
Okay, so next, we have just fabulous community partners. And one of those that I'd like to recognize today is the American Legion Auxiliary. And every year, they bring in school supplies at the beginning of the year to district office here. And then we have the social workers come from all the buildings and take what they need. And we serve a lot of children with many school supplies. And then last year, they asked me to come and speak, so I went to the Legion and talked about our demographics and why it's so important. And then, of course, when they hear more of the need, then, of course, they increased, like, by thousands of school supplies this year. So we had tons more school supplies to give out, which was awesome. And so another opportunity to thank a community partner for such fabulous work and commitment to the students in this district. And it was funny today, I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce you. This is Karen Seibert. She is with the American Legion Auxiliary, and she is a coordinator of their school supply program, snack program, really just anything to do with school. She's the contact that I've connected with. And so today when she was coming, I told her 5 o'clock, yep, just come up to the boardroom. And she's wheeling in this wagon, and I'm like, now what do you have? And she said, well, I got more snacks for you, because, we don't want to keep, she continually brings stuff. And I'm like, let's bring them up so everybody can see. So we wheeled her little wagon up. She dropped some more snacks off today. That wasn't planned, but I thought, a good way for you to see that anytime she's coming in the school, she's always bringing something. And so, again, great opportunity to thank Karen and the American Legion Auxiliary for all the work they do on behalf of the school district and the students. And when I was there, it was last week or the week before, speaking to the ladies at their meeting, as I left, I said, and of course, bottom line, I'm a teacher, a reading teacher, so I said, you all have homework, and part of the grants that I get are to promote community literacy. And so I gave them all books and said, you need to go to your neighbors, to your grandchildren, whoever's in town, and make sure they're reading. And here's a book to make sure that can happen. So again, I'm leaving you with some Llama Llama books today.
Wonderful,
But just want to, again, thank you, Karen, for all your work.
Thank you.
And a certificate of recognition from the school district.
Thank you very much.
I sincerely am very proud of this opportunity. 4 years ago, when I was unemployed, is when I realized the need in our community was far greater than what I recognized. And no matter how hard it was for me to put food on my table and help get my grandson ready for school, I knew it was much harder for other people. So I put my mind to work. And so we're in our 4th year now of our back-to-school supplies. This year we brought in over 660 items to date so far. Everything is tracked and reported and included in my annual report to the Legion every year. We started our Healthy Snack fundraiser for just a once a year around Thanksgiving, so we could try to get stuff in around the holiday and the winter season, knowing that that was difficult. After Mary Jo started attending our meetings, and our auxiliary members have seen that there's over 50% of our elementary students on the food program. We changed our program to bring in healthy snacks for the entire school year for these kids. And if it weren't for people like my mother and other auxiliary members participating and helping, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing today. It's not the work of one, it's the work of many. And these ladies have been very understanding and very caring, and yet most of them are senior citizens on a limited income, and they are still helping with these programs because they understand the need is there. And I'm very proud to accept this in honor for the auxiliary and take it back for all of the help that we've received from every member.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen, and please thank your whole group for all they do.
Yes,
It's
my motto is, no matter how large or small your contribution is, we are making a difference when we put it all together.
great motto. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 5, and that's approval of today's agenda. Okay, the motion's been made. Is there a second? It was motion and second. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have our consent items. Is there a motion there? Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Second. Okay, thank you. The motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent items. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to reports. First, Dr. Funk.
Let's see. Just a couple things tonight. We didn't really talk too much about the start of school yet. We started early this year. I think it's been pretty positive. You know, we had a number of students register late in the summer, and we always have to adjust to that when we have to add staffing when we add students, but adding students is real positive for the district. Some of the feedback I've heard, and this is more at the secondary level, we went, one of the comments last year when we started was we had 4 days, and I think 4 days for the first 3 weeks of school. This year, I think we went 5 full days. And so one of the things we looked at was we were able to last year give a full day orientation for grade 8, the first day of school. That helps with the transition to the kids at the high school. And then we had everybody return on day 2. So that's some feedback to look at as we, look at calendar starts for next year. And then the other thing is, and I don't know, we haven't really had no discussions on this at the board level yet, but if we're going to proceed with a similar calendar or change it, I think feedback we've heard from the community is sooner is better for planning purposes for vacations. So I think last year, when did we approve it? Probably February or March. So I would encourage the board, if we're going to do something similar or consider something similar, probably before Christmas, November timeframe would be something that I would recommend for consideration. So the other thing that we've talked about is athletic facility needs, and Hammer Field, and I've heard some other people we've talked about at the board level have come up and said, well, have you thought of this, or what about this? So here's what I propose that we do. I propose we do a thought exchange and we do it with the community to gauge your thoughts on our athletic facilities community-wide. And really 3 questions, pretty open-ended. What do you appreciate about our current athletic facilities in the community? What are your concerns about our current athletic facilities in the community? And then what information would you like to know about our current athletic facilities? So I think this will help us start the discussion on, a real baseline on what the community perceives as our need. And we can start to proceed planning and other discussions from there. So that's my report tonight. Questions on either of those issues?
What are the board's wishes on setting the calendar? I think when we voted last time, we'd only been through the fall. Now we've gone through the spring and another fall. And my thought was either the end of October or beginning of November that we should decide so the community knows. That would give us enough time also to reanalyze it, see what our feedback is, and then make a decision. So I don't know if we need to vote on it because we're not really voting on anything particular except when to decide. So any preference on timeline?
Is there any important data that we need prior to that, such as testing results, things like that, that would be in before that time frame?
Yes, so the layout is, you had a couple of the buildings talk in September here. The other 2 elementary buildings are gonna talk the first meeting in October. And then the secondary buildings, we're planning on having them talk the first meeting in November. I could move them up to the regular meeting in October if that would help. That way the board will have had a chance to review all the test information as a board prior to making any decisions that way.
So then we would look at the first meeting in November. Okay, good. Any questions or comments on athletic facility needs?
Do we know about how much that thought exchange would cost?
It's part of the contract we paid when we initially got it, so it's nothing, no additional dollars.
Any other questions or comments?
Are you thinking just outdoor athletic facilities, or is that question looks like all the athletic facilities?
I'm leaving it purposely broad, because really what I think that part of the discussion is a wider one with the city, because I'm sure we're going to have some people talk about hockey, okay? I think basketball is a concern, or gym space is a concern in the community. So I think that let's keep it broad, and then I think we can start to narrow it down based upon the results that we see.
I do have a question on that. My feeling is that when I look in the past on things, people are always focused in on their activities of their kids. And so how would we handle that? I mean, you could get an association all of a sudden say, get online and do this. And I just want to make sure that it's not tainted. And so how do we get people to look at the big picture and look at everything?
It's a 3-step process, so really the first step is people can put feedback out there, okay? The second step is you star the feedback, okay, yeah, I like this idea, and it puts the passion into, our soccer fields in this community are horrendous, and, if we have, the soccer association may say that, but it's a wider community discussion. So, I think I propose that we do it this way, and then let's see what the results are, and if they look tainted or they look, okay, we can try and recognize that. But This at least will give people a voice and opportunity to say, hey, here's what we think. But you're right, I mean, an association could try to say, well, we want this, this is important to us, so.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, so if we vote on the calendar on the first meeting in November, then will it be more of a vote? Are we going post Labor Day? You know what I mean? Maybe some of those specifics. Are we gonna have a 5-day start to the year, things like that? And we won't be voting on it like an actual calendar with everything in it? Or are we gonna vote on an actual calendar with everything in it?
My thought would be, we'll vote on a calendar with everything in it, but that's up to the board.
Okay. Thank you. Next, we have school board member reports. Once again, I can't remember which side we started on last time. We started with Neil. Okay, Angie?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to report. Once you all talk, I'll probably come up with something, but I don't have anything.
I attended the Prayer in the Park, which the community, faith community puts on, and I appreciate the effort they put into that. I think they covered every base they could think of, so it was a good attendance as well.
Yes, I discovered that I am a member of the PSEO Concurrent Advisory Committee, the committee that works together with Riverland. And so I attended a meeting last week. It was very interesting. I've been involved in that when I was on faculty teaching a concurrent class, and so I've been to several meetings, but this wasn't one of those. This was more a group of people who are administrative types and are involved in the overall planning and some of the details that have to be worked out in order to bring that that program to our students. So we spent most of the time talking about accreditation, and that's necessary in order for funding, which provides some of the funds that both districts and Riverland get as part of this program. And some of the biggest problems, I guess, is involved with the way that our concurrent programs are set up, or how our faculties and institutions, the colleges and the schools. Other states, I guess, have a program where the high schools and the colleges are required to have pretty much identical assessments, identical syllabi. We don't in Minnesota, and in fact, it's a contractual thing, as I understand it. So that gets to be a bit of a problem with our accreditation, because we're not completely in line with the rest of the country in that regard. The overwhelming opinion of those at the meeting, both high school people and Riverland people, are that the courses are established with very similar outcomes. I mean, completely similar outcomes, and we particularly like the arrangement where the instructor determines the specific curriculum that's going to deliver those outcomes, rather than being a slave to some master plan. So that's it.
Thank you. I also attended the Prayer in the Park, and last week we had the Elderly Education Foundation annual meeting banquet, and we had a forum beforehand on the Greater Education Project, in which we talked about, we had our advisory members that were there from the school district, from Aleta. Well, Aleta was not there. They were unable to attend this time. Jean Eaton, who is the leader on the project. We had Manny Style, who started the project originally. And we also had a student there speak about how the program worked for her. And so it was, I think, a good forum. Sam was there also. So next we have our teacher report. Janice?
Hello, Janice Jeffrey from the high school. This last Friday at the Tiger football game, we had our ALEA tailgating event, which is an event to get teachers and their families together, and also a social event for our new teachers to help them build relationships. And as we know, building the relationships when you're a new teacher is important to continuing to stay with Albert Lee, and so we want to promote that as much as we can. And it was well attended, probably 40 teachers from across the district and their families were at the tailgating event. We'll have another one for the homecoming game. And we also have our Gobble Wobble coming up in November, which is a fundraising event the ALEA puts on to raise funds for scholarships for students going into education.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to curriculum instruction, we have a board values discussion. Dr. Funk. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is certifying a levy at a maximum for 2017 and paying 2018. And Lori Volz.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Superintendent Funk, for your consideration is the approval of the proposed levy. This is 2017, pay 18. And there's a number of nuances in this levy. MDE just reran it on the 13th of September, and this reflects, these numbers right now reflect a 6.93% increase of 542,000. Now, there's a number of variations up and down from the prior year, but the main category that changed is the long-term facility maintenance that you may recall from prior presentations. It's a new funding formula, and it does provide additional funding for us to make various upgrades facility-wise. And that is, for example, why we're now able to incorporate upgrading our parking lots, basically, is a big factor here in our capital plan. So the increase of the levy share for LTFM is about $550,000. So the amount of our increase overall, the main driver of that is the LTFM formula. I do want to point out that LTFM, some components of it does have a state aid category, a link to it, and some parts of it does not. Another component that is a factor of an increase is the lease levy. The lease levy, one piece that went up for the new year coming up is in our lease levy share of the cooperative, the special ed cooperative building. Last year in our levy, it reflected just one installment of principal and interest. Now this levy document reflects, going forward, we're always going to have two principal and interest payments a year. So that actually, that line item went up by 87,000. Most of that is due to that increase amount for the special ed cooperative, our share of the lease levy for that. So those, just to kind of reference that, that 87,000, that's about equates to a 1%. So what that means is that that increase of 87,000 for the lease levy, there were some other small adjustments that actually, levies that went down that kind of offset that. So in a simplistic way of looking at this is that our levy is going up due to the long-term facility maintenance formula increase. So another thing that's kind of noteworthy, you may notice at the kind of towards the bottom of the screen there, the general debt service and the OPEB debt service. You'll see that the general debt service went down by 2.3 million and the OPEB debt service went up by 2 million. What's happening there is that the debt schedule for the high school building has now gone off the books. And so the existing debt schedule for the OPEB bonds is now kicking in. So up to this point, for the OPEB bonds, each year was just a smaller interest piece, and so now the principal is kicking in. So that's why you see it dropping down into a different category. It's just how our debt is spread at the timing of those debt schedules. So that kind of offsets it for the most part. So we're at this point of the proposed levy, and so what happens is the board, we need the board to approve the proposed levy, and we're recommending to approve it at the words "at maximum." MDE has been rerunning these, and we've had a number of corrections. They're still since this is the 18th of September, and they still could potentially be running some more smaller corrections up through September 30th, that it could happen. And so MDE does recommend school boards consider levying for the maximum. That way, if there's any small tweak coming through, it'll be in place for when the final levy comes to the board in December. Now, with that, there is a nuance available to us at this proposed levy stage right now, is that if the board wants to approve it at maximum, but if they choose, one thing we could do is on the LTFM levy, on that line alone, we could choose to under levy and reduce that, so it's not a $550,000 increase. We could tweak it back and still approve at maximum. I would just have to go in on the levy system tonight and indicate we want to reduce LTFM by a certain dollar amount. They'll rerun it tomorrow, and we can still approve it at maximum, which would be at a reduced amount. So if the board wants to consider, instead of the 6.93% increase, if we say, we'd rather see it at about a 3.5% increase, that is a step we can do, and I can enter that tonight. And what that would mean is that we would phase it in over 2 years. If the board decided they wanted to only see a 3.5% increase, then that means next year at this time, we'd see the remaining 3.5% increase flow through. Now, another piece I want to point out is this levy document does not reflect the new agricultural credit that we'll see the farmers would benefit from. So what happens is, when I certify this levy that's approved and send it to the county auditor, what happens next is county auditor, treasurer, they will be applying that ag credit after they get this document from us. So it'll be, in essence, recalculated in that fashion again. Before the truth in taxation notices are calced, they'll apply that credit at that level. So that's the timing of that. Any questions or thoughts?
I have a thought. I'm definitely not for the 6.93% increase. I think that when we look at the ag credits coming in, that's a lot to ask of our community at this time anyway, unless I'm...
The credits will reduce it, Ken.
What?
The ag credits will reduce the amount of the
Okay,
levy.
I'm sorry, I thought it
Yep.
was going the other way.
Nope, it's reducing the amount of the levy.
Do we have any idea what percent at this time?
As far as the calculation of what that ag credit will do for the farmers, what percentage, I do not have that as a percentage. I did reach out to Ayler's financial advisors and ask them if they could run some tax impact scenarios. I asked them if they could run that. Typically, we have them help calc some of that data for our truth and taxation hearing, which is in December. So it takes them a little time to crunch those numbers, but I did ask them if they could work on that as soon as they could to get the information to the board so we could ponder this before the final is approved in December. So we'll definitely get information for you so you can see, well, how is that ag credit impacting the tax, and how is that tax impact spread across different types of property values. And so they'll be working on that for us very soon. So I just want to mention that. I'll also bring some clarity for the board.
So then, just for clarification, let's say we decided we didn't like the 6.93, we wanted to be at the 3.5. Then next year, that 3.5 would be added on to whatever we needed next year. So if all of a sudden we needed 5 as a max next year, we'd already be at 8.5 because we forewent the 3.5 this year. Is that correct?
And when I say phased it over a 2-year period, that is, technically could be spread it over 3 years. It is certainly something. Just to give you an idea, what will that do to our projects? By reducing it by $270,000 would get us to reduce it down to a 3.5% increase. That would be, for example, I looked at the capital project list, and that would mean the parking lots project that we were for example, the Southwest parking lot project that's on the docket would be moved back a year. It kind of give you a flavor of what would that mean project-wise. So, you know, there are things we can do to make it more palatable, so it's not quite so high. It is part of the formula, so, like, for example, it was interesting, what MDE obviously anticipated this exact issue, and that's why it's a brand-new opportunity where boards can choose to reduce that LTFM levy amount, because they realize it is a jump. Many districts are experiencing this. If they didn't have a real high health and safety levy already, we had ours at a lower level. That's why we're seeing more of a jump. So it's an opportunity that many districts are going to be weighing over. And, you know, whether you spread it over a 2 or a 3, I mean, that's something that the board will be able to decide how they want to implement it over how many multi-year period. It is a local decision in that fashion.
So Lloyd, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming then that if we go at the higher rate, then next year the levy will be less?
Next year, we would not be seeing an increase. So we'd get up to our normal level. If we implemented the levy as it's proposed right now, then the formula is like fully in place, and going forward, it'd be at that higher level. And if we didn't, what I'm saying is then you could phase that increase in over a multi-year period to get to that final level.
So there would be a greater increase next year than to accommodate the lesser?
Right, so simplistically, if we scaled it back to 3.5% this year, then next year, we'd see it being at a 3.5% to get the formula at the maximum level. So I'm just cutting the 7% in half to 3.5 over 2 years rather than 1 year at 7.
But our total levy is going to be the same regardless, then I would assume. I mean, we're not going to be collecting less money if we go at the 3.5 or whatever this year. In long run, we'd be paying the same. We'd be collecting the same.
What I'm talking about is it would be the pay 18 taxes. So if we reduce it down to a 3.5% increase, then yes, the taxes will be less than this scenario, which shows almost a 7% increase. So for the 2018 taxes, that's the issue here. Do you want to put it to the maximum formula for the taxes, or reduce it down so that it's only 3.5% increase for the 2018 taxes?
Why did the formula get changed?
The legislature changed a variety of things here. We used to have health and safety funding, which majority was through the levy process. We had what was called deferred maintenance. And what they did is they revamped those two categories and changed it to be called long-term facility maintenance. So health and safety categories were rolled into that, and deferred maintenance was expanded into more categories. And basically what it did, the big goal there with the formula revamp was that districts needed more funding to maintain their buildings. We were hearing examples across the state where school districts simply did not have the funds to repair their buildings as was needed, or much less get to repairing their parking lots. And so it was a common theme across the state. And so the legislature changed the formula to increase funding. Well, what happens with that, for LTFM, as I mentioned, there is a component of LTFM that includes a state aid share, but there is a big part of it that is strictly local levy. And so that is where we see it come through in the the tax, the levy here, proposal is because of that local levy share of that formula.
So if we did go up 3.5%, any idea of what other capital projects would be postponed?
Like I said, I gave the example, that the amount that we'd be reducing is 270,000. So I only looked in the next year's capital project list. And when I talked briefly to Steve Anderson about it, I believe he mentioned such things as the parking lot upgrade would be, at Southwest would be pushed back. You know, basically, our parking lots is the one thing that we've really had to hold off because upgrading, with the HVAC upgrade, there was sometimes a small capital piece regarding that. But also, we've had some tuck pointing projects, roofing projects. Those are always going to take priority over a parking lot because we have to keep our buildings in good condition. So, in essence, just simplistically, it'll mean pushing back our parking lot upgrades a year or two.
Is anything we're doing tonight, it's all changeable until
Yes,
December 5th, right?
correct.
Because I think we want, I guess what I want to know is what is the ag credit going to do to the percentage?
Right, and that's something that I will be able to get that information as the county auditor works with that, and Ehlers will be able to put a summary together for us so that the board can have that information and mull this over for a couple of months so that when you need to approve the final version in December, then you have that full information. Now, keep in mind, what the board approves tonight as the proposed levy, that is what's going to go as a calculation for the truth in taxation notices. So that will be potentially, depending on what you approve tonight, if you approve it at the 6.9% now, and of course, when the truth in taxation notices are calced, that ag credit will be applied at the county auditor's level before they calc that. But if you decide to approve at maximum at the 6.93 and not change anything now, and then let's say you decide in December to move it back down to more like 3.5%, just know that those truth in taxation notices that go out to the property owners will be, the information will reflect this higher amount. And then it'll just be a matter of when they actually, if you approve it at a lower amount in December, when they actually get their tax statements in 2018, they'll say, oh, okay, this is actually different from the notice that came out in November. It is a lower amount. Does that make sense in the timing of things? So just something for you to be aware of.
I had a question, this might be kind of dumb, maybe I'm just not understanding the numbers, but do we have to get to that 6.9%? Do we have to get to that maximum? Is there a need? I'm sure the need is greater than the 3 point whatever percent, but is the need actually way up there?
The numbers are driven by the formula allows that level, and then you may recall when Steve presented that 10-year capital plan. So that 10-year capital plan laid out utilizing this funding level. And so can that capital plan be tweaked? Absolutely. And so that's where I'm saying in reality what's going to happen is projects such as parking lot enhancements are going to get pushed back a year or two. Which is not the end of the world, but it's just the reality of the numbers.
My thoughts are this, that this is not the final. I really struggle with that number, but I would be for approving the highest level because we can still reduce it. I want to go take a look at the parking lots. I'd like to see the list of the capital projects that we have listed in that time schedule and then go look at it because I want to make sure I feel comfortable with where we end up because I certainly don't want to end up at 6.93 unless I go to the facilities and I see that they're in dire need of what we've got planned, is my thought.
I would agree. I can't support a 6.93% on the community. I think the burden is too great for the community to bear. Even though I know it will be decreasing with the ag consideration.
Is
No,
it,
we don't have all that information, but how does that egg, if the farmers pay less, which I think is very deserving, then actually everyone else pays a little bit more to make that up, or am I understanding it wrong?
So what the ag credit means is that it is an aid, it's an aid, a state aid that comes in as a credit towards, and basically what it is ag land will get a credit for the levy components that have to do with bonds. So whether it's a building bond, whether it was like a QZAB bond, all facility bond, all those types of, it's not just building a new building. So, you know, the HVAC upgrade bonds, the all facility bonds, all those are in the category that are allowed for the ag credit. So it's a tax relief for ag land for those building type of bonds.
Does the state of Minnesota pick up part of that then? So,
Right.
okay.
And so it's an aid. So the state aid comes in and offset the levy component.
So the farmers get a little bit of a break.
Right. And we
But
don't
we
lose out because
Oh,
it comes
okay.
to us in the form of an ag
Okay,
aid, state aid. It's
Yep.
called aid credit, but yes, so the district does not lose out. It comes to us in the form of an aid.
okay, thank you.
so, Lori, if we were to go at a lower rate, then our farmers would enjoy a lesser credit? In other words, they'd be paying more at the higher rate, farmers would be paying more at the higher rate, but they would get more of a credit, so the state would be contributing more to our finances.
Well, keep in mind, the ag credit is regarding the building bond debt, okay? So LTFM, this component that I'm talking about with LTFM is regarding an annual levy, not a debt. So what that means is, if you go with the 3.5%, then the farmer is going to get the full ag credit that would align with the building bonds, okay? So they'll get the same amount of ag credit in either scenario, but obviously, if you reduce the LTFM levy, then it reduces the tax burden for anyone, regardless if they're a farmer or owning a home or a business owner. Does that make sense?
And Lori, we don't necessarily have to go to 3.5, we go to 5 or whatever the number is we choose, correct?
I just gave that for comparison purposes. Kind of looked at last year's levy. Increase was 3.2, I believe, %, just kind of as a comparative. So yes, it could be a different number as well.
Well, for discussion purposes, I'll make a motion that we move it from 6.93 to 5 as a max, and then we need the information that we need to make a final decision. And so I want to, Sam, I want to make sure that people don't get the impression that's where we're going to be at. I want to.
You'll have
So-
to give her a dollar amount, because what we're looking at right now is, this is a moving target from the MDE. So it's 6.9% right now. Okay, a week ago it was like 4%. So we don't know what it's gonna be on September 30th. So what you will have to do for your motion is, rather than go with percentages, say, yes. Because we are not gonna know what the percentage is if you're not gonna go at max.
Okay.
So what I need is a number that I would reduce LTFM by. That's one thing I can go online with the levy system and indicate the amount we want to reduce the LTFM levy by. And then approving at max would be taking that negative number into account to reduce the total. Does that make sense?
Can that motion be?
To give you an example, last year, what'd you say you think it was last year, 3.2%? Okay, on a $120,000 home last year, a 3.2% increase was $28 a year. Okay, so what we're talking here, this is not, we're not talking our entire district budget, okay? This is, this levy is facilities, it's health and safety. So when we say that we're going to increase, like in last year's case, 3.2%, okay? On a residential homestead of $119,617, taxes went up $28. That gives you a little bit of perspective on.
Okay, that does clarify things better.
Okay, I just ran the numbers. If we choose to reduce of the LTFM line by 145,000, that will get our levy increase down to a 5% increase level. I think that's what Dave kind of mentioned.
I would say 400,000.
Well, okay, so what I, can I clarify something? So basically, I need to know two things. The dollar amount that we want to reduce the LTFM levy line of, and approve the levy at maximum. We have to have that term at maximum is the preferred way to have the motion be, so that in case MDE has other corrections on other lines, that'll flow through to the final levy.
Okay, so I did make a motion at 5%, which is about 400,000, so if I'm doing this correctly, I would say 5% at 400,000. Does that meet your needs?
Well, so you're not going to approve at maximum then?
I'm just talking about myself. I don't know what others are thinking. 5%.
That's what I'm asking.
That's what I said, 400,000.
Okay.
Clarification, I mean, I would rather go high, I mean, I don't want to tax people high, but I'd rather go high and then they get their tax statement and go, oh, yay, you know, it's a little bit less than I expected, then they go the other way around. But, so I just want to make sure if we vote on this and this is approved, then we are going to come back and re-vote on it, and it might be lower at that time, well, depending on how we all vote,
Correct.
correct? Okay.
I agree, because even though a 3.2 is only 28 per year for that $120,000 home, it is in addition to all the other tax increases that are happening across the board, and there is some unrest in the community about possibly downsizing of jobs and things like that, and I would agree with the 5% and look forward to hopefully reducing that when we rediscuss it.
What was the number last year at that 3.2%? What was the hard dollar number? 350? Approximately, I mean, I know,
I can look.
somewhere. So it was like 330 to 350 or.
Well, I had an additional question when you're done with that.
Take me a little bit to pull it up.
While we're waiting, I will make one comment on, I do know that the last time I was on the board, that the money given to school districts was sending everyone behind in their buildings. I remember that. And so I kind of have empathy both ways, but I think we have to be responsible in what we put together.
The background on this is, for years, the 25 largest school districts in the state had access to this long-term facilities maintenance revenue. And so if you were a large district, they had the ability to go out and levy for their repairs. Unfortunately, many of the smaller districts in outstate Minnesota have buildings that were built in the early 1900s that were in dire need of repairs, but they weren't able to access dollars like that. So what we're seeing is the state chose to, over a 3-year period of time, go ahead and increase the long-term facilities revenue for school districts. And the biggest jump is year 3, which is just what we're seeing right now. That's why we have this, the more of a significant increase, because we are receiving a larger local levy, and at the same time, we are receiving some state aid on this as well. But what Lori has suggested is we're not going to touch the stuff we're getting state aid on. Her proposal is, to try and reduce the levy with the dollars that aren't matched by state aid. So that's kind of the bigger, how this has come about.
Okay, I did look up last year's levy document, and we had, our levy increased by $271,000, which was a 3.5% increase.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion?
I just had a quick question. It's a little off, but with the co-op with Austin, the special ed co-op, and we pay for the building, what do we, I know we get services for our students, but when they have higher enrollment, do we get some of that? Or like, how does it work? Do we just pay for the building and that's it? And we don't have to pay for our students there, so that's our benefit? Or how does that work? And are there any benefits when they have full capacity enrollment?
So there's 2 components to the special ed co-op. The building lease that we just talked about, Albert Lee and Austin share the cost of that. Principal and interest payment, basically that is driven by the fact that we did the renovations to that building. We were able to, the co-op was able to purchase the building at a reasonable price and much cheaper than building a new building. So that's that lease levy component. Then the other component of the education of the students. So the funding stream for that is that all the students attending there are special education. So the funding is strictly special ed for that site. Now, in the special ed aid calculation, it does include a gen ed aid portion of that formula because that's part of the tuition calc that MDE calculates. And so basically that is how the costs of the instruction, the teachers and paras and the staffing there are funded through the special ed formula. Does that answer your question?
And then, just one follow-up. So the special ed formula, basically pays for the education, everything that goes with that, teachers, et cetera, like you said. But then do we get to keep the general ed formula for them, or does that go to Austin as well?
So like I mentioned, that the gen ed is part of the tuition formula. And so what I mean by that is that the special ed co-op, they're their own entity, they're their own district, is receiving those aids. And so basically what that means is the cost of service is expensed at the co-op level, and those aids go directly there. So what that means is we're not getting anything back. Actually, though, I need to clarify that the Albert Lee School and the Austin School, this year, one of operation was very financially beneficial to both districts. So the aides that went to the co-op, and yes, that gen ed aide is following that kid there. The special ed co-op is actually right now in a preliminary audit stage of a fund balance of 200,000. So we're not having to kick in extra funds, if you will, for operations. They were adequately funded through the formula this year.
Okay. So basically, the benefit is that we don't have to, well, they're kind of in the co-op, which is sort of us, which is a benefit always. And then financially, that we're not like having to give money to another district or anything.
Right.
It's just paid through for this. Our basic only cost is the building.
Right, and so, for example, the tuition costs for the co-op, that's one thing we were analyzing, is that actually by servicing it's about 10 kids, it ranges from 7 to 10 kids for Albert Lee. Actually, the cost per student through the cooperative is cheaper than what often is having to be paid per student at another facility. So, yeah, it's been a financial win that way.
Okay.
Does that help?
And Lori, how much was that extra payment again? You had mentioned it earlier.
The additional piece for the lease and the lease levy for the cooperative payment, overall, the lease levy went up by 87,000. The bulk of that increase is for the cooperative lease levy.
Did you figured out, not exactly, but approximately how much we were spending, let's say, a year before the co-op per student compared to now?
For some of our students, we were paying like 45,000 per student. And once we get a full normal operation, the last calc I did on that, it was going to be ranging around 22,000, 21,000. So half the cost per student.
And when will the lease be, or when will that levy all be paid off for the building when we're done making P&I payments?
I believe that was a 15-year lease. Yeah, I guess I'd have to look that up for sure. In that range.
Okay, any further discussion? I think we've had some good questions, and hopefully everyone knows kind of where we're at. Are you ready for the question? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, is it all clear now? Okay. Signify by saying aye. Aye. Pull same sign. Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lori, for explaining everything for us. Next, we have our annual review on policies. Mark.
Good evening, Chair and board members. We have 3 policies to review tonight. The first policy is Policy 413, Harassment and Violence. What they're adding, this recommendation of the Minnesota School Board Association, is adding the term gender to the protective category. So throughout this policy, you'll see the word gender added to the protected categories. So that is all that is basically changed with that policy. Any questions? So that's policy 413.
Do we want to do these individually? Okay. Okay, You received that in your board packet. Is there a motion? Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second? Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the harassment and violence policy 413 signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries.
The second policy for review tonight is policy 414, mandated reporter of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse. Updates are what the definition of physical abuse, also reporting, and another major part is sex trafficking is added to the sexual abuse. The definition of reporting doesn't change for school districts. It deals with other groups specifically. So all people that work in the school district are mandated reporters, so that didn't change at all.
They're already adopted policies, so it's just an update to the policy. It's three, yes.
Any
Okay.
questions?
Any questions on mandated reporting of child neglect or physical or of sexual abuse? Is there a motion? Okay, the motion's been made. Is there a second? Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of policy 414 signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have our policy 514, bullying prohibition.
And there has been no change or no revisions to that policy, so. Right at the bottom, state statute dealing with charter schools is the change.
Okay, that's a pretty minor change. Do we still need to approve that policy?
What I would suggest is you just reviewed it, and we'll put on the annotation at the top of it. You reviewed it on 9/17, or 9/18/17. So I don't think you have to approve it, because nothing in the policy itself has changed.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Okay, moving on to item 11 is going into closed session and pursuant to Minnesota statute, section 13D.03 in labor negotiations. So is there a motion to go into closed session? Is there a second? Okay, motion's been made in second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Full same sign. Motion carries.